Hello, welcome to another video. Today I want to talk about the books that I've read in the months of July and August because I've read a few and I just want to talk about them because that's why I made this channel, to talk about books. Yeah, there's quite a few of them. I've read more than I usually read, and I just want to share my thoughts and feelings on these books, and I'll just dive right in chronological order. The first book I read and finished in the month of July is The Damned by Renee Ahdieh. This is the sequel to The Beautiful, and I'm not gonna go into detail on what this book is about because I will just spoil the first book, but I will talk about my thoughts and feelings on this without spoiling. Hopefully, I will do my best. So instead of explaining what this book is about, I will try to explain what the first book is about. So the first book is set in the late 1800s, and you follow the main character named Selene Rousseau, and she basically leaves Paris and goes to live in New Orleans, and she's taken in by this convent of nuns to like help her find a husband, basically, because we all know back then women weren't good for anything else. So yeah, eventually she crosses paths with Sebastian, and he's like this leader of this group, and you later find out that that group is full of vampires, basically, and a lot of stuff happens. Yeah, as you can see, I'm not like too great at explaining what books are about, but I'm doing my best here. So this book continues exactly where the first book left off. There was no like time jump or anything, and basically I think I liked the first book a bit more, only because I really had a hard time getting into the second one a bit, and that was unusual, especially considering that the fact that I'm already familiar with the characters and the world and everything, so it should have been like easy to just like get right into it, but I had a hard time doing that, especially for the like first half of the book, because nothing much was happening, or at least that's what it felt like. But after you pass like the 50% or so, the story really picks off. It becomes super fast-paced. There's a lot of things happening all at once. There's like a bunch of twists and turns to the story, and the world building becomes much more enhanced, and like there's much more to the story than you would have thought that there would be, if that sentence makes sense. Yeah, and to be honest, I kind of predicted the plot twist, but that still didn't stop me from enjoying this book, and I really appreciated all this world building and like how it's just so much more, and the fact that the world and the story and everything expanded. We're introduced to a couple more characters, and I'm actually really excited for the next book. I think the third book is going to be great, hopefully. I have quite high expectations for it, so I really hope it doesn't disappoint. Also, I just wanted to mention that I read this book as an e-arc from NetGalley, and I have since got a copy of my own because it is beautiful and I just wanted to own one, and I also gave this book 3.5 stars. The next book I read is A Dangerous Alliance, an ostentatious romance by Jenny Key Cohen. I listened to this as an audiobook, that's why I don't own a copy, so I'll just put like a picture somewhere around here. And I gave this one 3 stars. Basically, the title kind of says it all about the book. It's an ostentatious romance, so basically it's like a Jane Austen inspired type of romance novel. Now in this book you basically follow Vicky and her family suddenly find themselves in like a certain predicament that basically forces Vicky to have to get married very soon, and she obviously doesn't really want to do that because rushing to marry somebody you barely know could obviously lead to a very unhappy life. And since it's a historical romance, you know, back then divorces weren't as easy and all of that stuff. I don't have much to say about this book apart from the fact that it was like really sweet and fun, but also with like some more serious topics, and there's like a cute romance between Vicky and her childhood best friend, which is not really a spoiler because you can definitely tell from right from the beginning, because there's a lot of chemistry between them, and I definitely shipped them from the beginning. And yeah, basically that's it. I'd say if you like these types of novels, like cutesy, fun, and entertaining historical romances, then definitely pick this one up. The next book I read in July is Ghost of the Shadow Market by Cassandra Clare, Sarah Reese Brennan, Maureen Johnson, Kelly Link, and Robin Wasserman. There was no way I was going to remember all those authors. So I'm not going to go into depth on what this is about. This is like a Shadowhunter novel, and I'm 99% sure that all of you know what the whole Shadowhunter Chronicles are about. So basically, this one is like a bunch of short stories, but they're all kind of like linked together and they're put in a chronological order, so it kind of feels like an entire novel. And in all these short stories, we basically follow brother Zachariah just going on like missions and other stuff, and you like see characters from all of the other books, and it was a really fun time. I really enjoyed this book. This is a chunky one. This is like a brick, and I think I must have read this in like 3 days or something, and I obviously gave it 5 stars. I literally inhaled the pages, and yeah, nothing more to say about that. I'm enjoying Cassandra Clare's books, and I cannot wait to catch up because I'm a little bit behind, but just taking it slow one by one. And yeah, that's all I have to say about this book. The next book I read in July is Beach Read by Emily Henry. I gave this one also 5 stars. I really, 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 really loved it. This is an adult romance, but also it's like much more than just like a cutesy, fluffy romance. We follow two characters, Gus and January, and basically they're both going through some hard stuff in their lives. January is dealing with the passing of her father, so she has to deal with like grief and some other things that her father did while he was alive, and she finds out at his funeral. So like she's dealing with all of that, and Gus is also dealing with some personal stuff that you find about later in the book. And you just like, in this book we can definitely see how like flawed and real the characters are, and they're not like perfectly written unrealistic romance characters. And basically I just dove right in. I didn't even explain what this book is about. Basically both Gus and January are writers, and they're both in a writing slump, and they also know each other from college, and they're kind of like enemies or like competitors. And what they do is that they make a deal to switch genres, because January writes only romance and Gus writes like literary fiction type of books, and they switch genres and kind of make a competition out of it. Yeah, obviously throughout the book they kind of start falling for each other, and it's just a really, really good romance book, and I would definitely recommend it to almost anybody. Even if you don't really like romance, I'd still say maybe give this one a shot because it's still a really good book. I also got this one as an e-arc from NetGalley and have since purchased my own copy, which is this really adorable UK cover. And yeah. The next book that I kind of started in July but finished in the month of August is The Red Squirrels of Magic by Cassandra Clare and Wesley Chu. This is another Shadowhunters book. This is like a new trilogy of hers. The second book recently got published, so I'm really excited to get into that. That will probably be the next book that I read. In this book, we basically follow two characters, Alec and Magnus, and we follow them while they go on their vacation to Europe. But obviously it's not going to be a vacation, and they're going to get into a bunch of trouble and try and save the day. And yeah, this is basically what that book is about in a very, very vague description. What is really impressive to me, at least, about this book is that even though the story is like set in an earlier chronological timeline, that makes no sense. Basically, it's set, I think, if I'm not mistaken, in between book 3 and 4 of the Mortal Instruments series. Like, even though you know what happens afterwards, it still had me at the edge of my seat for some reason. So that's like a skill. Like, I think it takes skill to do something like that. So honestly, bow down to Cassandra Clare once again. And lastly, I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I read in the month of August is The Shadows Between Us by Trisha Levenseller. Again, I don't have a copy, I'll just put a picture. I used to have a copy, but I just unhauled it because, not because I didn't like the book, but I just didn't care enough to keep it. I just want my bookshelves to represent me and my taste in books and books that I love, and I just basically didn't really care about that book, and I didn't really need to keep it because obviously I don't have space on my shelves, and I'm just really strict about the books that I keep. So this book is basically marketed as a Slytherin romance, and in it you follow Alessandra, and she basically has a plan to make the Shadow King fall in love with her, marry him, and then kill him so she gets the throne and rule the country. And then you just follow her around as she tries to enact her plan. This book is supposedly also a fantasy, but there's, I'd say, maybe like 5% of fantastical elements in this, so that was kind of disappointing. Also, the main character, Alessandra, oh my god. Oh my god, I wanted to beat the crap out of her. She was so annoying and disrespectful, and she just has such a horrible personality, and honestly, she's like bad rep for Slytherins. And it was also quite unrealistic because like the interactions between her and the Shadow King were like, I don't know, she was being too straightforward and too, dare I say, rude to him, and he didn't even like flinch or anything, whereas in other situations in the books other people weren't even rude to him, and he was like, off with their heads, put them in the dungeon, kill them. And that was like, okay. Yeah, also this book had no world building whatsoever, like none. It's just basically you just following Alessandra on her evil plan. Yeah, it was just pretty unrealistic and just a womp. I mean, I still enjoyed it. It was still quite entertaining. I don't know, it just wasn't good enough. It compared to other fantasies that I've read, this was just amateur. Also, there's like this twist at the end, and for me it felt so out of the blue. There weren't any signs leading up to that. It just, I felt that it was put in there just for the sake of making this book like interesting and make something happen at the end, because honestly nothing much was happening apart from Alessandra trying to make the Shadow King fall in love with her and just their interactions. And yeah, that was kind of like, okay, let's just throw it out in there and create some more drama. And yeah, I gave this book a 3 stars, but I think I'm gonna bump it down to like 2.5. And I'm not sure whether I'd read from this author again, because I don't know, maybe if she writes like something that has a really intriguing plot to me. Otherwise, I wouldn't really go for any of her books because they just felt underwhelming. The next book I read is No One Is Too Small to Make a Difference by Greta Thunberg. I got this one from the library. It's like a really tiny 50-page book of her speeches that she gave at a bunch of like conferences and whatnot. I didn't give it a rating because it seems weird to rate somebody's speeches. I just read it on a whim because it was available on Libby, so yeah. The next book I read, I also got as an ARC from NetGalley, so I don't own a copy, and that is The Year of the Witching by Alexis Henderson. This book was amazing. I give it a 4 stars out of 5. I'm not entirely sure how to describe it. It has a complicated synopsis, at least in my head. But basically we follow Emmanuelle, and she lives in this country called Bethel, and it's like this puritanical society, and their holy leader is called the Prophet, and there's like this wood that is inhabited by witches, and Obviously, everyone hates the witches and they're afraid of them, and they follow the Lord's holy protocol, and everyone lives like a super religious, almost cult-like life. Yeah, I don't want to say more because I don't want to like spoil stuff, and also I think it's best to just go into this book a little bit blind, because that's how I went into it and that's how I go into most books, and I find it the best way. And basically this book tackles a few important topics like racism and sexism, and it does it in a very interesting way, especially considering that this is like a puritanical, obviously not a real society, is like fiction, but it's kind of based on a combination between The Crucible and Salem, like kind of put together, and I love both of those. And it also has like feminist themes and magic, and it's just a really, really good book, and I highly, highly recommend. I'm honestly sad that there isn't like a sequel or something, because it was just so good, and I'll probably read anything else that this author comes out with, because this was her debut and it was absolutely fantastic. On to the next book, which is My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Atessa Moshfegh. I think I said that correctly. I always confuse her surname and say Mogfish for some reason, because my brain be like that sometimes. But this is a very, very strange book, and it's also like quite explicit. So if you're not into like a little bit of graphic sexual stuff, but like not in a romantic context, beware going into this. But yeah, basically in this book we follow this woman that I think her name is never mentioned in the book, which is not something I've encountered before. And she tries to sleep for an entire year, like induce sleep with pills and drugs and stuff, and obviously not healthy. Basically by doing this she kind of wants to reset her life and her emotions and her mindset, because she's kind of dealing with grief but like not dealing with it, if you know what I mean. And you just follow her throughout this entire year while she tries to sleep, and some weird stuff happens. I'd say it's like a character study, kind of, I'm not sure, but it's an interesting book, and I definitely would like to try more from this author, because her writing is like unlike anything I've seen before, and this whole book is unlike anything I've seen before. It definitely intrigued me, and I want to see if she could come up with this. What else could she come up with? But yeah, I gave this a 3.5 out of 5 stars. And I want to say that I listened to the audiobook while following the physical text, and the audiobook isn't bad. The next book I started reading in August and I finished in September actually, and that is Sin Eater by Megan Campisi. I also don't have a copy of that because I got an e-arc from NetGalley. This book was a major disappointment. I was highly anticipating this book, and I was so happy when I got approved for the ARC on NetGalley, but honestly it was so hard to get through. It's like 300 pages and it took me so long to finish this, because a whole lot of nothing happens in this book. The book starts with our main character, May, and she is caught and put in prison because she was trying to steal some bread, because obviously she's starving. And also it's kind of set in like an old England, when England wasn't really England yet. Like I'd say maybe 1100s, 1200s, maybe around that time period, but like obviously it's still fictional. Back to where we were, basically May gets as punishment to be a sin eater, and that means that she's not allowed to be looked at or touched, because people are afraid that if they do that then they will be cursed. And her job as a sin eater is to take the sins of other people that are about to die upon herself, and she does that by eating foods that represent the sins at their funeral. So this way all those people go sin-free into heaven and not into hell. It also has like an interesting twist on Christianity, I'd say, because God is called the Maker, and also hell isn't ruled by Satan but by Eve. And yes, the Adam and Eve. And so that was interesting. I've never seen that done before. And what happens is that May becomes the apprentice of the old Sin Eater, and at this one eating, she basically sees a food that was not recited before the person dies, because recited is kind of like a confession in this book. So the person did not confess to a certain sin, but the food that represents that sin was on the coffin. And the old Sin Eater refuses to eat that, and because of that, she is killed. Then May goes about trying to find who is doing this and who put that unrecited food on the coffin, and she kind of gets involved into this like royal drama, and then somebody's trying to kill the queen, and kind of sounds interesting as I explain it, but trust me, a load of nothing happens in the book. You just follow May around as she eats and goes to recitations and just gets lost in the castle, and it was so boring, so dull, so hard to get through. Yeah, no, disappointment. So I'm kind of sad that I didn't like it, but oh well, I mean, it happens once in a while. And the last book I want to talk about is Attack of the 50-Foot Women, How Gender Equality Can Save the World by Catherine Mayer. And I started this in July, and I'm like half of the way through and I haven't finished it yet because this is a really hard read. This is like nonfiction, and that is not my main genre. I read like one or two nonfiction a year, and this is quite politically heavy, and I'm not that into politics. I'm still new, and there's a lot of stuff that I don't know, and that's why this is hard to get through. There's a lot of information on politics and just examples and feminism. It also makes me so angry reading this that I need to just take a break, breathe a little bit, and then continue. And because of that, I'm just making my way through this very, very slowly. It's still really interesting. I'm really enjoying this. It's just hard to get through. Eventually I will finish it. Yeah, I just wanted to mention it because I've been reading this in the course of the past few months, and this is kind of a wrap up, so this is just half wrapped up. That was not a good one. That is the last book that I wanted to talk about, and with that my video ends. I'm never good at these outro things, so yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.